Refused to help my grandfather after he chose my sister's lunch over taking my critically ill daughter to hospital. Then he lost everything when his favorite grandchild kicked him out. I, 35 am struggling with a situation involving my grandfather Robert, 78 that happened last month. I need to give some background to explain why this incident was the last straw for me. My parents died in a terrible car accident when I was 14, and my sister Becky, 28 was 7. It was a devastating time for both of us. Robert, our maternal grandfather, took us in. He was already a widower by then, and I later learned he never wanted us, but social services would have separated us if he hadn't stepped up. From the beginning, he made it clear that Becky was his favorite. She looked exactly like our grandmother Marie, who had passed away years before we came to live with him. I, on the other hand, was the spitting image of my mom, whom Robert despised because she had married my dad against his wishes. Growing up in Robert's house was challenging. While Becky got everything she wanted, new clothes, toys, the best education, and constant attention, I had to work for everything. I started working at a local grocery store when I was 15, stocking shelves after school and on weekends. Robert would say things like real men earn their keep or you need to learn independence whenever I asked for basic necessities. Meanwhile, he'd spend hundreds of dollars on Becky's dance classes and summer camps. Despite the hardships, I managed to excel in school. I got a full scholarship to college, which was fortunate because Robert refused to contribute anything toward my education. He said the money was saved for Becky's future. During college, I met Sarah. She was the most beautiful and kind person I'd ever known. Robert disapproved of her immediately, claiming she wasn't from a good enough family. He even tried to set me up with his golf buddy's daughter behind Sarah's back. Sarah and I got married right after graduation, despite Robert's protests. He didn't attend our wedding, which hurt Sarah deeply, but she never held it against him. We had our daughter Lily, 6 a year later. Sarah was an amazing mother, but tragedy struck when she was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. She fought hard for a year but passed away 2 years ago. Robert's response to her death was to tell me I should have married someone with better genes. He never showed any sympathy or offered any support during Sarah's illness or after her death. Lily looks exactly like Sarah, same auburn hair, same green eyes, same gentle smile. Maybe that's why Robert can barely look at her. He's never acknowledged her birthdays, never bought her a Christmas present, and always makes excuses to leave when she's around. It breaks my heart because Lily is such a sweet child who just wants her great-grandfather's love. I built my marketing firm from scratch over the past decade. It started as a one-man operation from my garage and has grown into a successful company with 50 employees. Last month, I had a crucial meeting in Chicago with a potential client who could double our revenue. The meeting had been planned for months, and I couldn't reschedule it. Lily had been running a fever for 2 days before my trip, but it was under control with medication. Her pediatrician said it was likely just a viral infection and prescribed some medications. I have a regular babysitter, Clara, 42 who has been with us since Lily was 3. She's excellent with Lily but doesn't drive due to vision problems. My close friend Shelley, 34 agreed to be on standby for emergencies while I was away. The day of my meeting, Clara called me panicking. Lily's fever had spiked to 104 degrees Fahrenheit, and she was becoming delirious. Clara had called Robert since he lived just 10 minutes away from us, and we'd always listed him as an emergency contact despite our differences. At first, Robert agreed to take Lily to the hospital, but then he called back 15 minutes later. I was in the middle of my presentation when my phone kept buzzing. When I finally stepped out to check, I had multiple missed calls from Clara. Robert had called her back saying he couldn't come because Becky wanted him to meet her boyfriend Adam, 32 over lunch. Apparently, Becky was planning to announce their engagement, and she wanted Robert to meet Adam first. Robert told Clara to call an ambulance if it was that serious. I immediately called Shelley, who dropped everything and rushed to my house. By the time she got Lily to the hospital, her fever had reached 105 degrees Fahrenheit, and she was having seizures. The doctors later told me that if she had arrived even an hour later, she could have suffered permanent brain damage or worse. I took the first flight home, leaving my team to handle the meeting. When I went to confront Robert the next day, he was having breakfast with Becky and Adam like nothing had happened. His exact words were, "Well, she's fine now, isn't she?" Becky's lunch was important. She wanted me to meet her future husband. Clara could have called an ambulance. Becky chimed in, saying I was overreacting and that family priorities matter. When I pointed out that Lily was family too, she rolled her eyes and said, "You know what I mean." This was about my future. I left their house feeling sick to my stomach. Later that day, Clara told me she had tried calling an ambulance, but there was an unusually long wait time due to a major accident on the highway. That's why she had called Robert in the first place. I've blocked both Robert and Becky's numbers. Robert has been trying to reach me through other relatives, not to apologize but to tell me I'm being unreasonable and dramatic. Becky posted on Facebook about how I'm trying to ruin her engagement happiness with my attitude. The meeting in Chicago? We lost the client because I had to leave abruptly. But I don't care. My daughter is alive and well, and that's all that matters. I've told Clara to remove Robert from the emergency contacts and never call him again for any reason. Ida for cutting them off completely? Update 1. It's been 3 weeks since my last post. First, I want to thank everyone who supported me and shared their own stories. Many of you asked about Lily. She's doing much better now and has started going back to school. I've hired a second babysitter who can drive, just to be safe. A lot has happened in these 3 weeks. Becky and Adam got officially engaged last week. They had a big engagement party at Robert's house, which I obviously didn't attend. Robert announced during the party that he was gifting them his house as a wedding present. This house has been in our family for 4 generations. My great-grandfather built it himself in 1940. Robert had always told us that the house would be divided between Becky and me after his death, not because I wanted or needed it, but because it was what my mom would have wanted. The day after the party, I got multiple calls from relatives criticizing me for not attending my only sister's engagement. I didn't bother explaining because these were the same people who turned a blind eye when Robert mistreated me growing up. However, one call changed everything. My Aunt Emily, 76F, Robert's younger sister, called me late at night. She's always lived in Florida and wasn't very involved in our lives, so I was surprised to hear from her. What she told me shook me to my core. Emily revealed that Robert had actually known about my Chicago meeting months in advance. I had discussed it with him during a rare family dinner in January, and he had even offered to watch Lily that day. According to Emily, Robert had called her the morning of the incident, complaining about having to choose between helping me and attending Becky's lunch. He had told Emily that Becky was threatening to elope with Adam if Robert didn't show up to give his blessing. But that wasn't the most shocking part. Emily then told me something about my parents' accident that she'd been carrying for years. The night before the accident, my dad had called Robert about borrowing his old pickup truck because Dad's car was making strange noises when braking. Robert had recently had the car serviced and knew the mechanic had warned him about the brake system needing immediate replacement. Instead of warning my dad or offering his truck, Robert told him the car would be fine for a few more days. He was still angry about their marriage and wanted them to learn a lesson about responsibility. Emily said Robert had confessed this to her years ago during a drunken Christmas gathering. She had kept quiet all these years out of family loyalty, but after hearing about what happened with Lily, she couldn't stay silent anymore. She said she didn't want history to repeat itself with another child getting hurt because of Robert's spite. I confronted Robert the next day at his house. I didn't tell him about Emily's call immediately. Instead, I asked him about the house. He smugly told me that I didn't deserve any inheritance because I had been disrespectful to him my entire life. When I brought up my Chicago meeting and how he had originally offered to help, he denied ever having that conversation. That's when I brought up what Emily had told me about my parents' accident. The color drained from his face. He started stuttering, then quickly shifted to anger, calling Emily a senile old woman who was trying to create drama. He accused me of turning everyone against him and said I was jealous of Becky's happiness. The commotion brought Becky downstairs. She had apparently been upstairs with Adam, looking at paint samples for their future home, my family home. When Robert told her what we were arguing about, she immediately started crying and defending him. She said I was trying to ruin her engagement happiness by bringing up ancient history. When I tried to tell her about Lily's hospital incident again, she screamed that I was being selfish and should think about the family's reputation. Adam stood awkwardly in the background during all this. I noticed him looking increasingly uncomfortable as Robert and Becky got more hysterical. At one point, he tried to suggest that maybe they should consider buying their own house instead, but Becky shut him down immediately. I left their house feeling both vindicated and deeply sad. Emily called again that evening to check on me. She apologized for not telling me about my parents sooner but said she had made a mistake in staying quiet and didn't want to repeat it. She also mentioned that Robert had called her in a rage, threatening to contest their late parents' will if she didn't retract her lies. Becky has been on a social media rampage since then, posting about how family should stick together and how some people, obviously referring to me, can't handle others' happiness. She's even posted old childhood photos of us, captioning them with things like missing when my brother wasn't so bitter. I've blocked both of them on every platform now. Some relatives have taken their side, saying I'm being cruel to an old man and a young bride-to-be. Others have reached out privately to share their own stories about Robert's manipulations over the years. Emily sent me some old letters from my mom to her, detailing how Robert had tried to sabotage her marriage multiple times. I'm starting to realize that cutting contact isn't just about Lily's incident anymore. It's about breaking a cycle of toxicity that has affected our family for decades. Update 2. It's been 2 months since my last update, and things have taken an unexpected turn. Becky and Adam got married last month in what she called the wedding of the century. She made sure everyone knew about my absence by leaving an empty chair at the family table with my name on it. Several relatives sent me photos of this powerful statement as they called it. Robert apparently gave a tearful speech about how he wished all his family could be there to celebrate. The irony wasn't lost on me. The first sign of trouble came 2 weeks after the wedding. Adam called me out of the blue on a Sunday morning. I almost didn't pick up, thinking it was another relative trying to guilt-trip me, but something made me answer. Adam sounded stressed and frustrated, completely different from his usual confident self. He revealed that living with Robert had become unbearable. After gifting them the house, Robert had moved in, claiming he needed to oversee the family property. At first, it seemed like a temporary arrangement while they sorted out the paperwork, but Robert made it clear he had no intentions of leaving. According to Adam, Robert had turned their lives upside down. He would wake them up at 6 a.m. because that's when proper families have breakfast. He criticized everything from Adam's work schedule, he occasionally worked from home, to the way they loaded the dishwasher. When Becky defended Adam, Robert would guilt-trip her by bringing up how he'd sacrificed everything to raise her. The breaking point came when Robert started inviting his friends over for dinner without warning, expecting Becky to cook for everyone. When she couldn't because of work commitments, Robert told his friends that modern women don't know how to take care of their families anymore. Adam said he'd never seen Becky cry so much. Things got worse when Adam discovered that Robert had been opening their mail and had even called Adam's office pretending to be his father, asking about his work performance and salary. When Adam confronted him, Robert claimed he had every right to know about the financial stability of the man living in his house, completely ignoring the fact that he had legally gifted them the property. Last week, after another argument about Robert rearranging their furniture without permission, Adam finally put his foot down. He told Robert he needed to find another place to live. Robert threw a massive tantrum, accusing Adam of being ungrateful and turning his precious granddaughter against him. He called Adam a gold digger who was only interested in the house. Becky initially sided with Robert, but when he started calling her a disrespectful ingrate like me, something snapped in her. She backed Adam's decision and told Robert he had 3 days to leave. Robert stormed out, saying they'd regret this. Yesterday morning, Robert showed up at my doorstep with 2 suitcases. He looked disheveled and had clearly been crying. When I opened the door, he started talking about how he'd made mistakes and wanted to make amends. He said losing his home had made him realize the importance of family. I let him talk, but when he mentioned Lily's incident, he still tried to justify his actions. He said he had been in an impossible situation that day, choosing between his granddaughter's big moment and a simple fever. That's when I lost it. I reminded him how his choice could have cost my daughter her life, just like his spite toward my parents might have contributed to their accident. He broke down completely, sliding down against my doorframe. My neighbors started peeking out of their windows at the commotion. Robert kept saying he had nowhere else to go, that Emily lived too far away, and that as his grandson, I had a duty to help him. I told him he should have thought about duties when he had them toward me and Lily. I reminded him how he'd failed as a grandfather and great-grandfather, and that karma had finally caught up with him. Then I asked him to leave before I called the police. Becky called an hour later, crying about how I needed to help Robert because he's still family. I asked her where this family loyalty was when Lily was in danger. She hung up on me. Adam texted later, apologizing for involving me but saying he couldn't handle the situation anymore. I heard from Emily that Robert has been calling everyone in the family, telling them his own version of events, that Adam is abusive and has turned both his granddaughters against him. Some relatives have offered him temporary accommodation, but knowing Robert, I doubt any of those arrangements will last long. Lily asked about the commotion at our door yesterday. I simply told her that some people don't change even when life gives them multiple chances to do so. Update 3, it's been 6 months since everything happened, and I think it's time for a final update. After I refused to help Robert, he stayed with various relatives before finally moving in with Emily in Florida. Emily called me last month with some news that explained a lot but changed nothing. Robert had been behaving erratically at Emily's house, forgetting conversations, getting unnecessarily angry, and sometimes not recognizing people immediately. Emily took him to a neurologist, and he was diagnosed with early-stage dementia. The doctor said the condition might explain some of his recent aggressive behavior and mood swings, but also confirmed that during Lily's incident 6 months ago, he was completely aware of his actions. The doctor estimated the dementia symptoms had only started showing up in the last 2 months. Meanwhile, Becky and Adam's marriage has been going through rough patches. They sold the family house last month, the house that started all this drama. Adam got a job offer in Seattle, and they decided to move there for a fresh start. Becky tried to reach out to me before leaving. She came to my office since she knew I wouldn't let her into my house. During our conversation, she finally admitted that she had been blind to Robert's favoritism all these years. She shared some incidents from after my parents' death that she was too young to understand then, like Robert throwing away the only photos I had of our parents because they took up too much space, while carefully preserving every single one of Becky's dance recital pictures. However, when I brought up Lily's incident again, Becky still tried to defend Robert. She said that with his age and now his diagnosis, we should forgive him and move forward as a family. I asked her if she would have said the same if Lily had suffered permanent damage or worse that day. She couldn't answer. Emily suggested family counseling with a therapist who specializes in elderly care and family dynamics. She thought it might help us understand Robert's actions better, especially in light of his diagnosis. I declined. Some things can't be fixed with therapy and understanding. Robert's actions over the years showed a pattern of deliberate cruelty, not misunderstanding or illness. Last week, Robert sent Lily a birthday card with a check for $5,000. I returned it unopened. He also sent me a letter talking about regrets and second chances, but it felt more like he was sorry for himself than for his actions. He wrote about feeling lonely in Florida and how he misses his real home, but didn't once mention Lily's incident or apologize for it. Lily is doing great now. She's thriving in school and has started taking piano lessons, something she loves. Sometimes she asks about her Aunt Becky or great-grandpa Robert, but less frequently now. I've decided to maintain no contact with both of them. Becky texts occasionally with updates about their life in Seattle, but I rarely respond. Emily keeps me informed about Robert's condition out of courtesy. Apparently, his dementia is progressing, and he often talks about the past now. She said he recently cried about my parents' accident, but I don't know if that's genuine remorse or just the disease talking. Either way, it's too late to matter. Some relatives still think I'm being too harsh, that family should stick together no matter what. But I've learned that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for yourself and your children is to break toxic family patterns, even if that means walking away from blood relatives. My priority is ensuring Lily grows up in a healthy environment with people who genuinely care about her well-being, not those who see her as an afterthought or, worse, a burden.